What's going on, everybody? My name is Michael Weir, and it's Christmas Eve. And since it's Christmas Eve, I thought I'd wear my ugly Christmas sweater to talk to you guys about my top 10 favorite movies from the year 2022. Now, before we get into my list, there's a couple things we have to talk about. The first thing is I have not seen absolutely everything that came out in 2022, because to do that, I would have had to stand in front of my screen for 52 weeks straight and not move because of all the streaming services, theater releases, things like that. There's too much content. And because there's too much content, and I have kids and a wife and a full-time job that isn't YouTube, I just didn't get to see absolutely everything. But I did see a lot, and every movie that I talk about on this list today, I have done reviews for, and those reviews are linked down below. You can watch my full thoughts, whether they're right out of the theater reviews, maybe they're YouTube shorts, depending on if I had enough time to do like a full-length review, or maybe they're down here in my movie theater room where I talk to you guys about movies in a very controlled environment. With all that said, guys, I'm excited to talk to you about this list, but keep in mind that my list will not match your list. It shouldn't. Movies are art, and art should be interpreted differently by every viewer. So if your favorite movies are not on my best of list, well, don't get angry about it. Don't go into the comment section and be a troll. Just put your list of what your top 10 were in the comment section down below, and I'd love to know what you saw this year, if you saw 10, and if you had a ranking for those 10. That'd be fun. Let's keep it light down there, and let's just remember that we do these videos for fun. These are my favorite movies. That doesn't mean I hated other movies. That list comes out tomorrow. And with that said, before we get to my final list, we have to talk about my honorable mentions. Now, my first honorable mention, guys, is The Black Phone. This was a good horror movie that came out in the summer, had a few really good jump scares. I really enjoyed it. I wanted to put it on my top 10 list, couldn't get it there, but I did enjoy it. My next honorable mention is The Northman. The Northman's another movie that I really enjoyed. I thought it had a lot of very good visuals, just couldn't get it onto my top list, but I really enjoyed this movie, and I look forward to seeing what Robert Eggers does next. And my final honorable mention is a movie I just saw recently that I did a review for, and I really loved, and when I watched it, I was like, this is gonna make my top 10. There's no way it doesn't. And then when the list shaped out, it just lost out. It's the 11th spot, and that is The Menu. The Menu is a movie about these food critics and people going to a dinner that turns horrific. And it was very well done, very well written, very well directed, very well acted. I really loved everything about it, but all of those features couldn't get it to my top 10 list. But it's an honorable mention. I definitely recommend it. With all that said, guys, let's get to my top 10 best movies of 2022. At number 10, guys, is a movie that I really enjoyed, but it's also a movie I had a great experience with, and that is Bullet Train. Bullet Train is it's 100 miles an hour. It's an action-packed movie. It stars Brad Pitt, and it also stars Aaron Taylor Johnson. It stars a ton of famous people, honestly, but those are the two that kind of stood head and shoulders for me. But the experience I had with this movie was more than anything else. Like, I've recommended this movie to some friends, and some people like it. Some people are like, too many coincidences happened to make this movie believable, and I understand all of that, but part of my top 10 list is the experience that I personally had when seeing this movie. And I went and saw this movie with my brother on his 25th birthday. We sat down in the theater, we watched this movie together, we laughed the whole time, we enjoyed the action. It was just a fun moment. So when I look back at 2022, I look at the movies, I really do, for their merit and, you know, what they gave us as a product, but I also look at the experience I had with that product, and I will say that Bullet Train made it to this list because the experience of that movie was just as fun as the movie itself. At number 9, guys, we have Scream. Now, 2022 was a year for horror. It really was. There was a lot of great horror, there was a lot of bad horror, and there was a lot of in-between horror. But the fact that we got so much horror, and you're going to see that on this list, there's quite a few more horror movies that made my best of list, and I just want to point that out. We got a lot of great horror, but these were my favorite. And so at number 9 was Scream. Now, Scream is the 5th movie in my favorite slasher franchise of all time, and that is because, like, you've got your Michael Myers and your Freddy Kruegers and your Chuckies, and all of those are cool and they're scary, but at the end of the day, when I watch them, I'm like, okay, but it's supernatural, it couldn't really happen. Whereas with Scream, other than the fact they're wearing ghost face masks, it's all pretty believable. I mean, you've got best friends that are jealous most of the time and killing their other best friends, or in this movie, they want to recreate the events of the first Scream movie. It's great. Like, I loved the requel idea they did with Scream. It worked for this movie, and I look forward to what they do with Scream 6 next year. So Scream 5 made it to number 9. At number 8, guys, we have Pearl. Pearl is a follow-up prequel movie to a movie we'll talk about in a little while on this list, and is about a girl living on a farm, and then horrific things happen, and I loved every second of it. I loved Mia Goth's performance in this movie. Some people I've seen liked her performance in this movie more than they liked her performance in the next movie we'll talk about, but for now let's talk about this movie. I personally thought this movie was great start to finish. I loved her monologue she had in this movie. I think it was like 8-9 minutes, something like that. It was a really long monologue that Mia Goth had as Pearl in this movie, and it just blew me away. The acting in this movie was great, the directing in this movie was great, and I love the cinematography of this movie. Like, I just loved how vivid the colors were, especially because when we go to my next movie, the cinematography is very different. So I like that the director and the main star of this movie were able to change the tone so much, but keep them in the same universe. So Pearl is number 8. At number 7, guys, you probably guessed it already, it's X. X is a horror movie that came out earlier this year about an adult film crew that goes to a cabin that's on this property that they rent for the night to film an adult movie. But the people who own that land, an old man and an old woman named Pearl, played by Mia Goth, are not happy that they are using this land for an adult film, and they start murdering everybody. And also Kid Cudi's in this, and it's pretty great. I really like this movie. I like the setup for this movie. I like the execution of this movie. And then again, at the end of this movie, they gave us a preview for a movie coming soon, which was Pearl, we just talked about. And I love that they created a universe with this movie, and it ultimately will be the middle movie of the franchise, because at the end of Pearl, they talked about Maxine coming next year or maybe the year after that. I don't know when it's coming. They haven't announced it officially. I mean, they've announced it. They haven't announced the date officially. So X was just, it was something I've never seen happen before, and they executed it. Nice, okay. They executed it perfectly. At number 6, guys, we have Hulu's released Prey. This is a movie I'll never understand why it wasn't released in theaters. This could have been great on the big screen, and it might have even bumped up a couple notches had I seen this on the big screen, because Predator is like one of my favorite movies of all time, and then Predator 2 is not great, but Predators I love, and then The Predator with Shane Black, we just don't talk about it because it's that bad. And then you got the AVP movies. My point is, there's been a lot of Predator lore, but they've never gone this far back to Prey, and I loved it. I really did. I liked the story arc for the girl who's a Native American tracker. She wants to be a hunter, but everybody in the tribe's like, you're a girl, you know, your place is in the kitchen, I don't know what to tell you. But she's like, no, I am gonna hunt. And so originally they're looking for a lion, and then they're looking for a bear, but as it turns out, she comes face to face with the Predator and has an incredible showdown with the Predator. I won't spoil it. I loved Prey. I loved every second of it, to the point where when I finished this movie, I immediately had to rewatch this movie. My only regret for this movie is that it wasn't on the big screen, and that's too bad. Okay, we're getting to the top 5, guys. We got to talk about how big a deal that is, because that's what every YouTuber does. I don't know why. But at number 5, guys, we have Hellraiser. It's another horror movie. I told you, it's an incredible year for horror, and I loved Hellraiser. Hellraiser was, if I did a top horror of the year, this would be my favorite horror movie of the year. Hellraiser was everything I wanted it to be, and everything the original was not, which I was shocked by, because Clive Barker had a lot of hand in that original movie, and I'm just not a fan. Now, I didn't watch till I was an adult, and had seen better graphics on things, so maybe that's part of my reason for not liking the original Hellraiser. Because of that, I never really watched the Hellraiser sequels. I was like, I'm just not going to take time to watch those. The first one was not good. But then I watched this brand new Hellraiser, and I think this was the horror movie of the year. I loved the look of all the Cenobites. I loved the storyline of this movie way more than I liked the storyline of the original movie. For me, this is the Hellraiser movie to watch. If I recommend a Hellraiser, or if it ever comes up in conversation, this is the movie I'm going to talk about. Hellraiser is number 5. Okay, guys, at number 4, we have The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, starring Nicolas Cage as Nicolas Cage. This movie was at the top of my most anticipated movies of the year 2022 list. I was so excited to see Nicolas Cage play Nicolas Cage. It was like, how can this movie be bad at all? And it wasn't. It was phenomenal. I bought this the instant it came out on Steelbook. I had to have it. I've got the 4K. I've watched it a couple times. I think that Nicolas Cage playing himself after all these years of everything he's gone through is just perfect. And I think that he did a fantastic job playing himself. And then you got Pedro Pascal in the movie, who did a great job as well. Where this movie sort of lost me is where it went from a sort of a buddy movie to a action movie. But that's kind of Nicolas Cage's style. It's his life. So I wasn't mad at it. It's just, took a little bit of a turn. But ultimately, seeing Nicolas Cage play himself and all the self-references to Nicolas Cage's previous movies and works and all the pictures, everything you see in the movie, it just worked for me as a huge Nicolas Cage fan. It would have been higher on this list, but the next three movies are just so damn good. At number 3, guys, Top Gun Maverick. I didn't even put this on my most anticipated movies of the year list because I thought this movie didn't look great. I was like, the original Top Gun is good, but how could this movie be better? And how could this movie be, any better than the movies I put on my most anticipated list? And Top Gun Maverick blew me away to the point where I went and saw this alone, and then I told my wife, I said, you've got to see this with me. And we went back to the theater and we watched it, and she loved it too. And I think everybody that watched this movie went back to the theater to watch it again because it made $1 quadrillion. Like, this movie made so much money, and I'm happy for Tom Cruise that he was able to get this movie done and that it was a success, because this movie could have been such a schlocky piece of shit movie, but it turned into such a heartwarming movie. And it's just, the US military doing their thing. Like, I love watching that movie. So Top Gun Maverick, number 3. If you haven't seen it, it's on Paramount Plus now. I recommend you check it out. At number 2, guys, is a movie that caught me off guard. I mean, I was kind of excited for it. When I saw the previews, I didn't know what to think of it. It's a dark humor movie. It's also a serious movie, and it's got a lot of heart to it. And again, going into this movie, I was like, I don't know how I'm going to feel about it. When I watched it, it blew me away. It's Vengeance. This movie, starring BJ Novak, is phenomenal. I rewatched it the other night just to make sure it's not my number 1 movie of the year, and it's not, but if it wasn't for my number 1, this movie would be my number 1 movie of the year. I love this movie. I love the story arc for the main character in this movie, played by BJ Novak, and I love that he starts as this cynical guy who answers every conversation as 100%, like just to move on. He writes for the New Yorker. He doesn't really care. He's this playboy. But by the end of the movie, he does something drastically different than his character from the beginning of the movie would have done, because he's grown and he's learned. And the movie ultimately is about vengeance. And I just love this movie. It's not an action movie. It's not a laugh out loud comedy. It's got a lot of dark humor in it. It's not a movie that would usually be on my radar, but as I grow older, maybe, I don't know, movies like this just speak to me. And I loved the calm way that this movie portrayed itself to a shocking ending that was just, I don't have another word for it, beautiful. I really loved the ending of this movie. So Vengeance is my number 2 movie. If you haven't seen it, it is streaming on Peacock. I recommend it. At number 1, guys, you know what the movie is if you've been watching my channel at all this year, and that is The Batman. The Batman, starring Robert Pattinson as Batman, is the best movie of the year, by far. It is everything I wanted out of a Batman movie that I didn't know I needed. I loved the Riddler. I loved the Penguin. I loved Falcone. I loved Zoe Kravitz's Catwoman. Like, I loved everything about this movie. It is a phenomenal movie from start to finish. It's well crafted. It's well paced. At no point in this movie on a rewatch am I like, all right, checking the time, got to figure out how much time is left in this thing. No, not one bit. When I rewatch this movie, it's an experience every single time. It's also a movie that I got to see 5 days in advance, which helps the ranking chart for these movies. I got to see it 5 days in advance, which is the first time I've been able to do that. I got to put out an early review, which was really cool too. It's something that I hope to be able to do down the road with my YouTube videos. Haven't gotten there yet, but that's fine. Ultimately, I just want to talk about movies on YouTube, but if I get to review them early, that's, a really cool thing. So The Batman, it's my favorite movie of the year. I loved everything about this movie, and I just can't wait for the second one. I'm hoping they bring in Mr. Freeze. Come on, everything's flooded. You could just bring on winter. It would be frozen, and you could do something realistic with Mr. Freeze. I really think that. So The Batman is my number 1 movie. Guys, that's my list. That's the best movies that I saw in 2022. Like I said earlier, if you have a best of list, I'd love to put that down in the comment section down below. If you like this video, don't forget to hit the like button and the share button so your friends can see it. And finally, don't forget to subscribe and make sure you hit that bell for notifications, because tomorrow I'm dropping my worst of movies from 2022. That's the movies that I thought were terrible and I'd want nothing to do with ever again. I will never watch them again. I'm just going to talk about them one more time this year, and then that's it. Okay. Thanks for watching. See you next time.